This is
Good evening, I'm Esther Githo. It's Wednesday, May 15th. This is Africa 54.
Sudanese protesters continue to demonstrate outside the Ministry of Defense in Khartoum as the Transitional Military Council and opposition inch closer to a deal. Feeling the pinch, Zimbabwe's farming sector reels from the land reform policies of former President Robert Mugabe. And a sneak preview of Dynamic Range, an action-packed Africa Diaspora film.
Sudanese protesters staging a sit-in outside the Ministry of Defense in Khartoum are standing by their demands as the military council and opposition inch closer to a deal. Amid the demonstrations, Sudan's military leaders have announced several terms of agreement with the country's main opposition council, Sudan's Transitional Military Council, and the Opposition Declaration of Freedom and Change Forces have agreed the country's transition period would last for 3 years. While some protesters say the move is in the general direction of progress, others say it is too slow. The demonstrators want to keep up pressure on the military for a quicker handover and have been camped on the Defense Ministry's front door since April 6th. On Tuesday, the sit-in area and eastern Khartoum were blocked from the capital center by barriers that the protesters have erected. Zimbabwe's economy is struggling, especially in the farming sector, which continues to feel the effects of the implementation of former President Robert Mugabe's land reform program of the early 2000s. Many farmers are angry, and they expressed their frustration last Saturday in Chinhoyi, the hometown of Mugabe. Columbus Mavunga reports.
In Chinhoyi, about 120 kilometers northwest of Harare, ZANU-PF is in charge, and pro-government statements are the norm. But that was not the case Saturday, where farmers openly expressed anger at the government of President Emmerson Mnangagwa for not fixing the ailing economy. Doug Taylor Freem, a former leader of the predominantly white Zimbabwe Commercial Farmers Union, was among those who spoke.
When President Edie came into power, he made an appeal to the world. Please, can all those financial institutions come into Zimbabwe and bring investment here? There's no need for him to be traveling all around the world looking for this money. It's here. But we just need the right documentation so we can put the right security in place. And I promise you, overnight, there will be a huge change.
When he speaks of documentation, Freem is talking about giving farmers the legal right to their land. Most white commercial farmers were pushed off their land in the early 2000s by the government and replaced by black peasant farmers. Those new farmers have no guarantee they will be allowed to stay and no collateral to use to borrow money from banks. Without those, Freem argues, the farms cannot be productive. Some, like tobacco farmer Roni Masango, blame Zimbabwe's chronic cash shortages for the current situation. The country has relied on foreign currency since abandoning its own worthless dollar years ago, and there hasn't been enough of it. According to Masango, things won't improve until the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe addresses shortages of cash and makes an effort to preserve the value of the local currency.
We were told that there is a 10-year jail term for illegal foreign currency trading. Is that law not yet in place? We want cash in the banks, not in the streets. Parallel market is the source of our economic problems. That is where corruption starts.
The government is calling for patience as the country goes through what President Mnangagwa calls austerity for prosperity measures to reverse years of recession under former President Mugabe's 38-year rule, which ended in 2017.
To be fair to Reserve Bank does not create a parallel market. A parallel market or a black market is created by shortages. So what we are doing is to come up with austerity measures, and also this devolution conference. The moment we have a scenario where our production increases, we kill the parallel market. We have to acknowledge that we have had 20 years or so where there was no development.
It remains to be seen if the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe can assure citizens and farmers like Roni Masango that the economy will stabilize. There was a round of nationwide demonstrations in January when fuel prices increased. The opposition has indicated more protests will materialize unless things improve. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Chimoyi, Zimbabwe.
A draft report from the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services was reviewed in Paris recently. The report was 3 years in the making and is expected to lay out a rescue plan for the world's vanishing biodiversity. VOA's Kevin Enox has the details.
It's no secret the Earth is losing alarming amounts of biodiversity around the world. From Madagascar's lemurs to amphibians like frogs and salamanders and even plants. Some estimates suggest 50% of the planet's biodiversity could disappear this century. A new report from the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or IPBES, is expected to lay out the damage we are doing to our own home in stark terms.
With the worsening state of the living world, which this report will unfortunately continue to document with more and more worrying figures, with the loss of our cultural landscapes in the countryside here in France, but also elsewhere in the world, we lose more than just these material things. We lose a bit of our soul, a bit of our reason for being.
The report has taken 3 years to write and cost over $2 million to produce. Its goal is to envision a world that allows for human growth and maintains the world's biodiversity.
When we have an agricultural project, we have to think, how do we maintain biodiversity in our agricultural systems? If we've got a water project, how do we actually expand our water project without hurting biodiversity?
The report drew on research from thousands of sources, including 150 experts, and reviews the impacts humans are having on natural environments, from coral reefs in the oceans to terrestrial ecosystems, as well as some of the planet's most iconic species. The authors say their hope is that the next generation will embrace the recommendations contained in this report.
You can be sure that young people will make the consensus their own because a new alliance is being created between the scientific world and young people, an alliance which comes at a critical time for the future of biodiversity and so for the future of humanity.
The last global assessment of biodiversity was issued in 2005. Kevin Enox, VOA News.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi on Wednesday opened a suspension bridge over the Nile River, touted as the world's widest. It's one of a series of military-led mega projects designed to improve infrastructure and provide jobs. The bridge, which crosses the Nile just north of central Cairo, is a key link in a highway stretching from the Red Sea in the east to Egypt's northwestern Mediterranean coast. It is meant to help reduce congestion in Cairo. A regional director for the Guinness Book of World Records was present at the opening to confirm that it is the world's widest suspension bridge. Now, as tensions rise between the United States and Iran, Europe is urging both sides to avoid any further escalation. The European Union is trying to salvage the nuclear deal that was struck with Tehran in 2015 amid mounting pressure from Washington to abandon the agreement. Henry Ridgwell explains.
Fighter jets launching from the U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, in the Mediterranean earlier this month, en route to the Middle East. Alongside the Naval Strike Group, several B-52 bombers have arrived at the US airbase in Qatar, designed to counter what the Trump administration says are clear indications of threats from Iran to US forces.
The question comes, how is Iran going to push back? How are they going to show the United States that if you keep pressing us, we can respond? And at that point, if they get that wrong, there is a risk of runaway escalation.
Europe believes that risk is dangerously high, a point made clear to US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo as he arrived in Brussels for talks Monday.
We are living in a crucial, delicate moment where the most relevant attitude to take, the most responsible attitude to take is, and we believe should be, that of maximum restraint and avoiding any escalation on a military side.
Washington pulled out of the 2015 nuclear agreement with Iran last year. Up to now, Europe has urged Tehran to stick with the deal and effectively wait out the Trump administration, says analyst Watling.
What we've seen over the last week is the US administration putting an awful lot of pressure on the viability of that policy. And in pushing the Iranians to the point where they have walked away from a key component of the deal, it essentially underscores the fact that that might not be possible to continue in that direction. So Europe will have to decide.
Meanwhile, the US continues to tighten the economic noose. India was a major importer of Iranian oil, but stopped purchases this month in the wake of renewed US sanctions. Visiting Delhi Tuesday, Iran's foreign minister issued this warning.
But unfortunately, the United States has been escalating the situation unnecessarily. We do not seek escalation, but we have always defended ourselves.
Watling says any conflict with Iran would quickly engulf the region.
It has to fight essentially a regional deep battle, which means activating a lot of the assets they've developed potentially in Lebanon, in Iraq, and conducting ballistic missile strikes.
Fear of such a conflict has rattled Europe, caught between the demands of its US ally to abandon the nuclear deal and warnings from Tehran that such a move would lead to a resumption of its nuclear program. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Hippos are helping to rejuvenate African rivers and lakes. Scientists say the animals' nutrient-rich dung makes them vital to the health of aquatic ecosystem. But the researchers also warn that the dwindling hippo population could prove harmful to those waterways. Here's VOA's Deborah Block.
Here at Kenya's Masai Mara Park, the dung from these hippos is actually revitalizing the Mara River and downstream, Lake Victoria, Africa's largest lake. The researchers are taking water and soil samples in the park to get samples of the dung and river water.
The hippos have been around Africa and this particular river for millions of years, so the ecosystem is really adapted to it and knows how to deal with this dung coming into your river to such a point that it's now actually vital for the river. The fish, for instance, that live in the river, they have adapted to use this dung, for instance, as a food source.
The mammals are protected in the park, but outside the preserves, hippo populations are down due to poaching and loss of habitat.
At night, it lives on land and it grazes the grass of the savanna. And during the daytime, it rests in rivers and lakes where it's safe from predators.
Every day, hippos eat up to 25 kilos of savanna grass, which contains silica. The natural organic substance is transported into waterways through the hippo dung, which helps the environment by offsetting nitrogen and phosphorus runoff from farms. Silica is also crucial to the health of diatoms, tiny algae which play an important role in the ecosystem. These single-cell organisms turn sunlight into energy through photosynthesis and are a key source of food for other creatures.
Now, when there becomes an imbalance between nitrogen, phosphorus, and silica, then other algae take over the competition between the diatoms and the other algae, and then we lose the diatoms as a dominant species, and then we lose also the functions these diatoms have in the ecosystem.
The study showed that more than 3/4 of the silica, which ends up in the Mara River, came from hippos, helping keep the food chain in balance. Deborah Block, VOA News.
We'll be right back.
It could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I am Sheikh Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very
Now, the U.S. military appears to be ramping up its arsenal in the Middle East, possibly to counter a potential attack from Iran. But is it the right move? And what exactly is the threat? VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Bob has details.
A show of force and a clear signal to Iran. A Patriot missile battery and the USS Arlington will join 4 B-52 bombers and the massive USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier strike group. Commanders requested all of this extra power after intelligence picked up potential Iranian threats on land and sea against American forces in the region.
It's important that Iran understand that an attack on Americans or its interests will be met with an appropriate response.
The threats included commercial vessels that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had loaded with military hardware to include missiles, according to a senior military official. But a senior counter-Islamic State coalition officer told a different tale. Have you seen any threat indications?
No, there's been no increased threat from Iranian-backed forces in Iraq and Syria.
After the briefing, the U.S. military said recent comments from the coalition's deputy commander run counter to the identified credible threats available to intelligence from U.S. and allies regarding Iranian-backed forces in the region. All service members assigned in Iraq and Syria are now on high alert.
If we can find some very limited way to respond, I think we will, and I think we should. But if we overdo it, we could be on the path to war.
Officials say the United States does not want war, but it will protect American forces. Carla Babb, VOA News, the Pentagon.
It's time for our technology segment, and joining us now is our tech reporter, Paul Diho.
Thank you, Esther. Across Africa, countries are experimenting with the drone technology to deliver on-demand emergency medical supplies to remote areas. The use of drones appears to save lives. Take a look. For an aspiring drone pilot, racing unmanned aerial vehicles in my neighborhood or empty parking lots is a new hobby, and I still have a lot to learn. Perhaps I should not quit my day job as a journalist anytime soon. In the United States, 3 main steps must be taken to become a certified commercial drone pilot. Step 1, you must learn the rules as required by the Federal Aviation Administration. Step 2, you must pass the knowledge test required by the FAA. And step 3, you must register your drone with the FAA. A San Francisco, California-based tech firm, Zipline, is changing the way people use drones. The company has a fleet of drones that carry medical supplies to remote areas in Africa. Earlier this month, Ghana became the second African country after Rwanda to launch a fleet of drones carrying medical supplies to remote areas. The drones are part of an ambitious plan to solve the problem of medical access in a country with poor roads.
With the Zipline and its provision of the drone technology, we believe very much that if it happens that we have to bring things on an emergency basis, it's going to be much easier for us. within a very short time, like where we find ourselves in the new Tafu Government Hospital, within 30 minutes you have this product delivered to you.
Zipline is quickly becoming one of the world's largest independent logistics networks, providing nearly 13 million people with instant access to essential medicines and revolutionizing access to healthcare with a cost-effective drone delivery network. Zipline's drones have been flying test runs with blood and vaccines at the main drone base in Omenako, 70 kilometers north of Accra, one of the company's 4 distribution centers. Zipline says 3 other main sites should be up and running by the end of 2019.
When people are in urgent need, when their life is on the line, and the hospital might not have the blood or medicine they need to stay alive, we're able to get that medicine to them in 15 to 20 minutes by sending a drone and airdropping a package of medicine to the hospital.
Zipline began its African journey in Rwanda in 2016, delivering blood and medicine in Rwanda. That success has inspired other African countries to tap into the technology. In 2016, Malawi's government launched Africa's first drone air corridor to provide a controlled platform for drones to deliver needed services to communities. UNICEF Malawi primarily supports the testing corridor as a pilot project using unmanned aircraft systems for transporting dried blood samples for the early diagnosis of HIV in infants. In Madagascar, drones fly blood and laboratory materials from rural villages to a research station for testing. The drones help doctors speed up the identification of disease in patients and make quick deliveries of vaccines. Some commercial drones are already being used to monitor crops, inspect bridges and transmission lines, and assist firefighters and police officers and filmmakers. As for Zipline's future, the sky is the limit. That's today's Tech Reporter. Back to you, Esther.
What a great piece, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, be sure to join Paul Ndiho each Wednesday for another tech segment on Africa 54. Now, the African diaspora here in the Washington, D.C. area is once again overflowing with creativity in film production. This time, the action-packed project is Dynamic Range, produced and directed by a Cameroonian immigrant, popularly known by his company's name, Dexter Brains. I spoke with him and one of his key actors before the PG-13 film premiered here in the D.C. area. It's a film of good versus evil that begins with a crackling fire, perhaps symbolic of the gunfights, fistfights, and kicks. It's the story of 2 friends, Hugo James and Thomas Washington, who grew up together like brothers, but differed later in their moral judgments. David Bande portrays Hugo James, a crafty drug dealer who wants to import drugs from Mexico to the United States, while his childhood friend Thomas Washington works for the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. In terms of directing, how does Hugo play his role here?
Somehow, somewhere, this person automatically fits in, 100% into that character and gave us exactly the type of personality that we wanted, body language, voice authority and everything.
Hugo is a guy who believes in his money. And he thinks that with money, he can get anything he wants. Nothing can stop him.
He pleads with Thomas to do everything in his power to ensure he can bring in the drugs.
I am here because my goods are right now on their way to Tijuana border. My partners, they're going to be on my neck, bro.
Thomas in the movie was the guy that was actually being threatened by Hugo James.
What I want you to do is to see how you can help me get these goods into the United States without any hindrance from the Drug Enforcement Administration.
The diverse cast of continental Africans, Americans, and Hispanics comprised of women who excelled in their supporting roles.
The one woman that I would pick out was the sniper. With that particular character, she was one person that was not scared of Hugo James.
She actually brought out the authority in the woman that I wanted to see.
Desperate and greedy for money, Hugo makes one last appeal to his friend Thomas.
I'm gonna make you a better offer of $4 million cash. I have a consignment that is coming from Mexico City.
Disappointed by his childhood friend, Hugo seeks the advice of his partners.
My contact in the Central Drug Enforcement Administration in the United States is currently out of the country.
Sorry, Mr. Hugo. This is not a decision we can make. We operate on professional basis, and there is absolutely, and I mean absolutely, no room for a plan B.
Undeterred, Hugo hires aides and assassins, dispatching some to assist his female partner in Mexico.
And I do not have to remind you that you're going across the U.S. borders.
Here, a male aide shows two of the women how to camouflage their car.
To green, to red, and back to silver.
In Hugo's world, the aides and assassins don't necessarily know they're working for the same boss.
So you touch me, you die. And you know what I like and what I don't like. And so it is $9 million, or there is no deal.
Thomas knows his life is in danger and hires the female sniper to track Hugo down. But he's kidnapped and locked in the trunk of a rental car. Enter Jack, fresh from Africa, who's visiting his girlfriend in the U.S. She unknowingly rents him the car holding Thomas in the trunk. Once Thomas frees himself, the mother of all wars with Jack erupts. So how does Jack get out of this quagmire?
Jack got involved in a problem where he doesn't know where the problem comes from. He doesn't know how to solve it. So he was standing in the middle of nowhere. Going forward is dangerous. Going back is dangerous.
There's a sigh of relief as the female sniper tells Thomas she has spotted Hugo James.
I got your boy on my crosshair.
What is your takeaway message?
We have so much talent. It is just lying there waiting to be tapped into.
Looking at the production of the dynamic range, there's clearly no shortage of the African diaspora talent in the film industry. And that's our show for today. Watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.